Hello everyone, we will start today the new topic which is psychology and comfort. Okay. In last few classes we have discussed various aspects of clothing and related to comfort. We have also discussed that various factors which affect clothing comfort and various aspects related to that. In these aspects like psychological aspects, neurophysiological aspects, thermophysiological aspects, transmission related parameters. So, all these things now we will discuss at different segments, and first segment is that psychological aspects of clothing comfort. So, if you talk about the psychological aspect, so there are three main factors which influence clothing comfort sensation. First is physical factors which deals with the human clothing environment related factor, that is a human clothing system, and this factor we will not discuss here. We will discuss the factors which are related to the psychological factor and psychophysiological factors which of the wearer, which actually indirectly affect the clothing comfort sensation. So, first factor is the physical factors which deals with human clothing environment system. Second is that psychophysiological factors of the wearer, and third one is the psychological filter of the brain. So, all these things we will discuss. Psychological filter means how a person after sensation it sends signal to the filter and brain, and how the brain evaluate and filter that sensation, and ultimately we get that sensation. So, in this segment we will discuss these two sections, which is psychophysiological factors of the wearer and psychological filters of the brain. So, which ultimately give the clothing sensation, comfort sensation. So, if we talk about the psychophysiological factors for expressing the human clothing comfort, which are related to average skin temperature. So, if the average skin temperature is high after wearing cloth, so the person will become warm. Okay. So, that we have to control the average skin temperature. Okay. So, degree of skin wetness. So, to keep the, as we have discussed, to keep our body temperature constant, core temperature, our physiology, body physiology keeps sending releasing the sweat, and our clothing has to actually act there to maintain the skin dry. So, if the skin is wet, then we will feel the uncomfortable due to wetness. So, that is also psychophysiological factor. Rate of sweating also depends on the physiology of a person, but as we have already mentioned that depending on the clothing type of cloth. So, rate of sweating we can also control, and also the if type of activity controls the rate of sweating. Then amount of sweat developed. So, if the sweat is amount of sweat is high, our clothing's function is to absorb this sweat. Okay. Amount of sweat absorbed by the clothing, and last one is the rate of heartbeat. So, this all these things actually related to the psychophysiological factors which expressed by the human comfort. Okay. So, then comes the psychological filter of the brain. Now, what happened when we wear cloth? So, we get different type of stimulation, like thermal stimulation, skin related stimulation. Okay. So, the clothing comfort is a human psychological perception related with the clothing ensemble, okay, and which is an outcome of complex linkage between individual sensation, like it is a sensation of warmth sensation or touch sensation or different types of sensation, even smell or maybe sound, different types of sensations we receive from the after wearing the clothing, and it sends signal to individual signal, it send to the brain, and brain evaluates and weight every sensation, and ultimately it gives the combined sensation of either whether it is a comfortable or not. I will give you one example. Suppose a fabric, it is totally comfortable in all respect, like touch, maybe it is creating its warmth, or maybe moisture vapor transmission, sweat absorption is all right. But suppose it is making sound, it is making sound, continuous sound. So, we may not feel comfortable, or else a fabric is very comfortable in touch, tactile sensation, it sends signal as a very good touch, but it is warm. So, ultimately, so our brain actually tries to evaluate all this sensation. Finally, it is a combined sensation we get, and we get ultimately it gets signal it is comfortable or not. So, if we see it is a very complex linkage between all the sensations. Okay. So, the important physical, physiological and psychological factors which controls the clothing comfort are, these are all this, as we have discussed all these aspects. Like you start with say environmental condition, like environmental condition directly or indirectly affect our sensation. Finally, if the environment is warm, ultimately we will get warmth feeling whatever clothing we are getting, okay, we are wearing. So, ultimately we will get that feeling. If it is say humid, so relative humidity, hot or cold. So, finally, we will get one particular sensation that of our comfort sensation. Okay. Then it comes the physical factors or environmental factors that we have, like human interaction or activity level. So, clothing comfort, as we know that depending on the activity level, human activity, if it is active, so or if he is we are sitting idle. So, it depends that comfort sensation depends on our activity level. So, our clothing's function is to compensate all this heat and moisture mass transmission equation. Okay. Physiological process. So, thermoregulation response of the body, like we start sweating. So, we may feel uncomfortable if our skin remains wet. So, our clothing's function is to make it dry or to evaporate all this sweat. So, that is the thermoregulatory systems of the. Next is the psychophysiological process, like your different sensation we get, and that heat and moisture transmission. Then physical factors. So, different physical factors like heat, moisture transmission or air transmission. So, this all these characteristics directly or indirectly affect our comfort sensation. Another important factor is that skin sensory section, as we have, whether it is a touch, is that it is a harsh feeling or soft feeling. So, all this sensation. So, if we talk about this all this skin sensation, environmental or physical sensation or physiological process, okay, all this process, all that receives the different sensor of in our body receive the sensation, ultimately it sends the signal to the brain, and brain perceive the sensation. Brain actually evaluate all this level, whether it is warm, it is how much it is warm. So, that actually it evaluate the sensation, and it is warm or cold sensation, hot sensation, hot feeling, or even sound, even it is a smell. So, it takes all suppose a clothing, it is highly comfortable, but it does not smell nice. Okay. So, you may feel uncomfortable. So, all these sensations it sends, along with this the aesthetic sensation. Aesthetic sensation, whether it looks good, appearance. So, that also a psychological sensation, it goes to the brain. And another is that it is a fitting, whether cloth fits nicely. So, that is again aesthetic sensation. So, it brain takes sensation from all these sources, and finally, it evaluates, and it takes the weightage and then evaluate. Okay. So, suppose a clothing thermal sensation, it is a temperature difference is little bit, it is not too high, say 27 degree is the comfortable, it has become say 29 degree Celsius. So, brain will wait that say okay, this what is the difference. Similarly, if it is its pressure is high than normal, very high then. So, that it will take the weightage, and ultimately it will give a combined sensation. We cannot tell that okay, it is warm and all this, ultimately brain gives a particular sensation, it is whether it is comfortable or not. Okay. So, in this segment we will discuss all these aspects, okay, how to evaluate all this sensation, okay, psychological sensation. Now, physical perception of clothing comfort, it is generally influenced by tactile, touch related, it is a physical perception, okay, touch related clothing comfort and thermal sensation. Okay. These are arising from the contact with the clothing. When our body in contact with the fabric, we get two types of physical sensation, the touch related sensation, another is thermal related sensation, that is related to whether it is warm or cool. Okay. So, the overall the factors which affect the clothing comfort sensation is the moisture related factor, whether it transmits moisture, tactile sensation related factor, thermal factor and fit related comfort factor. So, these are the physical factors which send signal, along with some aesthetic factors which is not measurable. This we can simply measure. Okay. So, there are various attempts made to actually measure the perceived comfort. So, there are attempts, statistical attempt or technique or neural network technique to measure the clothing perception. Okay. Here it gives three different techniques. One is subjective judgment technique. What happened? We will discuss detail. It is basically like wear trial technique. It is a subjective judgment. Clothing is given to different people, okay, or expert, and they have been given, they have been asked to judge whether it is comfortable or not. Okay. What type of signal you are getting, whether it is warm or cold, whether it is harsh or soft, or it is a stiff or flexible. So, different judgments. So, we will discuss that this type of different techniques we have followed, and ultimately it gets signal, sensory signal, and brain gives some output value, and we get subjective judgment whether it is okay, comfort or not, comfortable or not. Similarly, next is that it is the statistical analysis. We get large number of data, it is a softness, hardness, a different large number of data, and this see subjective judgment, it gives a single value, single, let us say okay, this is harsh, this is subjective judgment, but this statistical technique we actually measure the different value, it is a softness, hardness and all these things objectively measure, and get ultimately large number of data, and then analyze the data with the maybe with the subjective value, subjective judgment we analyze the data and finally get the relationship correlation. And last one is that which is latest one, it is a neural network. In neural network we get the different sensation, and with the different input layer, hidden layer and output layer, with different layer we get the output value. Like if you see the it is a back propagation technique. Okay. So, here so different comfort related sensation we give as input, it is input layer, it is like clammy face, clinging, damp, okay, sticky, scratchy, okay, thermal sensation. So, different sensation we get, okay, and then ultimately through hidden layer we get some predicted comfort value. So, this is one of the techniques we can use this neural network technique. So, to get the psychological perception of clothing. Okay. Now, the sensory perception of clothing comfort is it is generated, type of sensation generated from clothing ensemble depends on it is a type of clothing, type and level of activities and the environmental condition. So, ultimately we get the all this sensation depend on all these activities. Okay. So, suppose for a particular clothing, if we change the activity, our sensation will be different. So, clothing is not the only factor. Okay. All these three factors has to come together, then we get the final sensation. For a particular clothing, if we change the activity, we will get different sensation, or we keep the activity same, if we change the environment. So, we will get all this different. So, it is a interrelationship all these parameters. The most common clothing comfort related sensory attributes are the thermal, moisture, tactile, hand and aesthetics. So, we are not taking here the sound related activity or smell. So, these are not common, but if we want to incorporate, we can incorporate here. But for clothing comfort related activity, so these are the attributes: thermal related sensation we have to get, moisture related sensation, tactile or hand, whether it is a hearts or something, or aesthetic look wise. So, if we want to incorporate, as I have said that it is everything, this all these parameters, everything they are correct, they are perfect, but if the cloth smells awkward, so we will feel uncomfortable. So, if we want, we can incorporate the smell and also sound. So, that may sometime it may be irritating. Okay. So, we will actually stick here, we will confine ourselves with all these activities. Okay. So, the established attributes of the sensory perception of human is that it is these are the attributes, whether cloth is loose or tight, it is a fit related component, heavy or light, stiff or pliable. So, these are all tactile related sensation, okay. Sticky or non sticky, sometime the cloth if gets stick to our body, we may feel uncomfortable. Like one example, if we start sweating, we are wearing a cloth, say cotton cloth, if we start sweating, then our that same cloth which was comfortable, it will start sticking with our skin. So, we will feel uncomfortable, like absorbent or non absorbent. So, if it is absorbent, so it we may feel comfortable sometime. Okay. Cold or warm, so that directly gives the thermal related sensation. Okay. So, all this type of pricky or non pricky, it is a tactile related sensation. Okay. Rough, smooth. So, there are various attributes you can define, but we should be very careful. It is a some of the parameters, some of the attributes may be confusing. Okay. So, we cannot take all the attributes. So, sometimes it may get we may get confused. So, that is why it is actually the standard attributes we use normally, most important attributes, coarse or fine, that is one attribute we can take, whether fabric is coarse feel or fine feeling, that is the one tactile attributes. Rough or smooth, stiff or pliable, hard, soft, cold or warm, roasted or white. So, these are the attributes we normally use. Okay. So, these attributes, what are the attributes? These attributes is the physical sensation what we get, the physical intensity we get. Okay. And sensory perception means this attributes is external one, we get the attributes like your touch, warm, cold, these are the external attributes we get from the clothing or environment. Or sensory perception means what our brain perceive that value. So, these are the two factors which are very important in psychology, psychological perception. So, this relations between the attributes, physical attributes or external attributes with the sensory perception, which is actually it is known as psychophysics. The psychophysics is a relationship, laws of psychophysics deals with the relationship between these attributes and sensory perception. So, there are different laws of psychophysics. Here we will deal with the we will discuss three important laws of psychophysics. So, that means this laws of psychophysics is about the quantification of the strength of internal sensation. It's you have to quantify the strength of the internal sensation, which can be broadly defined as the quantification of sensory experience. Okay. What is that? The measurement of strength of internal sensation has two aspects. So, if we want to measure the internal strength of sensation, we have to measure in two steps. One is that it is a signal identification. So, the assessment of human power of signal identification and sensory discrimination, like if it is whether it is a warm or cold, this I am touching here, whether I am feeling warm or cold, that is identify, I can identify, that is the first power of brain, we have to identify. It is a soft or hard. So, I am touching here, this is giving hard feeling, but when I am touching it is a soft feeling. So, our sensor should be able to discriminate whether it is a cold or hot, soft or hard, or else good or bad. So, this is the sensory discrimination you have to do. And next is that it is a calibration. It is a calibration, means if it is good, how much it is good, if it is hot, how much it is hot. So, these two aspects our actually brain has to be. So, the measurement is in two aspects. One is that we have to identify the sensory discrimination, or we have to identify the signal, and then it is a calibration, our brain has to calibrate. So, if it is hot, it is how much it is hot. So, these two aspects are there in any measurement. Okay. So, G. T. Fechner, who actually originates the mathematical relationship between these two. What are these two factors? One is the stimulus, external stimulus, and sensory perception. These two he has first actually formulate the interrelationship between these two. Okay. Much before that, what is that? It's he has done on 1860. He has developed this, but much before the 1834 first law, which is actually proposed by Weber. Weber's law proposed that the threshold, that is just noticeable difference of the stimulus, external stimulus, is proportional to the magnitude of the stimulus. I is the stimulus, means external stimulus. This can be expressed as this delta I by I, which is constant. What does it mean? It where this k constant which indicates the power of human being to detect signal and discriminate the sensation. That means, it has to that k depends on the power of the human brain. Okay. Now, here which means that I value. So, the magnitude of sensation is actually we can at low temperature we can differentiate even 1 degree Celsius temperature difference. Okay. At low stimulus, at low magnitude of stimulus, okay, we can perceive the change. Like if the temperature change from say 5 to 6 degree Celsius or 5 to 7 degree Celsius, we can make clear difference. Okay, it is warm, today it is warm, warmer than. But if it is say 45 to 46 or 45 to 47, it will be little bit difficult. So, it is basically this threshold of change of sensation, it is proportional to the quantity of magnitude of the sensation, okay, stimulus, sorry, magnitude of stimulus. Here the main problem with the Weber's law, it does not deal about the internal sensation, it talks about the only stimulus, the external stimulus. It does not talk about the internal sensation of the body. How much do we feel, that relationship he has not actually proposed. Okay. Now, Weber's law is silent on internal sensation, it does not talk about the internal sensation, only the background intensity is actually that it is proportional to the difference in intensity. So, at different level of intensity, so we can make out difference in that. Okay. And this is the absolute threshold when we start getting signal. Like what is that absolute threshold? Suppose we are touching. So, after certain pressure only our sensor will start receiving the signal. So, that is called absolute threshold, minimum change in that. Okay. So, this is the Weber's law. Next is the Fechner's law. So, 1860 he has proposed first relationship between the physical stimulus and internal sensation, which is a logarithmic relationship. Okay. S is the internal stimulus is equal to k, which is constant, and log of physical stimulus. Okay. So, if it is say physical stimulus, suppose it is a temperature or brightness or color, brightness of color. So, internal stimulus, so this is the physical stimulus, and S is the internal sensation, how much we are sensed. So, what he has proposed that this k is actually k is the constant determined by the stimulus threshold, which represent the lowest physical value evoking the sensation, that is that as we have discussed, the threshold, and the differential thresholds providing the subjective unit of sensory intensity. And here it says that he assumed that sensation S, it changes arithmetically. Okay, this changes arithmetically, whereas the intensity of physical stimulus, it increases logarithmic step. So, that is the his assumption. So, it is I. So, if you see the actual graph, this is the stimulus, this is the graph, this is the intensity of the stimulus x axis, and y axis it is a intensity of sensation. Okay. And if we convert it to a logarithmic scale, so it is a log I, okay, and which is directly proportional to the intensity of sensation. Okay. So, this changes in arithmetic change, and S changes arithmetically, sensation changes arithmetically, and intensity changes, intensity of stimulus changes with logarithm. Which what does it mean? Suppose we are touching, suppose we want to take the sensation of warmth sensation. So, initially suppose we are changing, so 0 to 10 degree Celsius. Okay. 0 to 10 degree Celsius we are changing. The type of sensation increases, say it is 1, it is 1 sensation increase, sensation it is a arbitrary unit, okay. It is a increase in 1 sensation, okay. But similar increase in sensation if we want to have another one, say up to 2 sensation if we want to have increase, then our temperature has to increase from 10 to 100. So, another 90 degree increase if we can have, then the similar change in sensation will be there. So, this is he is the first one who gives the relationship between the intensity of stimulus and intensity of sensation. This is the relationship, okay. But he failed to quantify the value. He could give the some relationship, but he failed to quantify the amount of sensation, okay. And third one, latest one, it is 1950s, around 1953, 54. Stevens proposed on Power law, which says that method of estimation of relationship in subjective, say similar, the internal sensation and physical stimulus with the form of S equal to k I to the power a. K and I, they are the constant, where k is a scale factor and a is an exponent characteristics of physical stimulus. Okay. So, this by these two, so what he has made, you just try to see S equal to k I to the power a, S is sensation magnitude. So, internal sensation what we are getting, it depends on the that k is a constant, it is arbitrary constant of determining the scale factor, okay, scale of the unit. I is the stimulus intensity as we have discussed earlier also, and a is the power exponent dependent on the modality, which is extremely important. He could quantify, Stephen could quantify the a value, a depending on the type of stimulus. So, type depend on the modality, modality means type of. So, if it is say heat or cold, we will get one particular value of a. If it is electric shock, we will get a particular value. If it is pressure, we will get. So, he could quantify the value. So, if you just rearrange this equation, so log s equal to a log I plus log k, which is constant, this in this form we can get. Okay. So, finally, if you see, so this is the relationship Stevens power law, which is says the S is the magnitude of estimation, that is estimation means estimation of internal sensation, k is a constant, I is a physical intensity of physical attributes outside, which may be like brightness, may be apparent length, may be electric shock, okay. N is exponent. So, typically if you see the this is the in power law, this is the different types of relation. For electric shock, this is the relationship. For brightness, this is the relationship, and for apparent length, this is the relationship. So, where the value of n exponent has been defined. So, some known exponent for Stevens power law is like for brightness it is a 0.33, n will be 0.33, k can be any arbitrary value. So, type of curve is like this. Similarly, electric shock, n is 3.5, power is 3.5, this is the apparent length itself. So, what does it show? So, you can see for all these 3 different types of sensations, the ultimately with the increase of stimulus, the physical sensation increases all 3, but rate of increase is different. Like for brightness, it initially increases then slows down. Okay. That means, with the increase of intensity stimulus magnitude, we get increased sensation, but at higher level the increase of sensation is reduced, although its rate of increase is reduced. Which what does it mean? Initially, if it is too dull, very dull, okay, to certain increase say 20 or 30 its arbitrary unit increase in brightness, it will give you sudden jump in sensation. We will feel okay, this is very nice, it is very bright, our sensation will tell it is a bright. But from say 70 to 90, if it brightness increases, we will feel some increase in sensation, but it will not give you the actual the rate of increase which was we got in initial stage. That means that it depends on the value of the power, N value. Okay. Now, if it is electric shock, so initially if you see electric shocks for certain in lower voltage, if we get shock, we may not get the sensation that much, but after certain level we will start getting the sudden sensation. So, these things we can have the N value for different warm, cold or touch or different types of sensation we can derive. So, here Stevens actually he could quantify the internal sensation, which is his actually real contribution. Okay. So, all these laws of psychophysics indicate that there is a fundamental difference between physical stimulus I and internal sensation. So, we get sensation from different physical stimulus, but these are totally different. Okay. There are relationship. Okay. Webers and Freshners, as we have discussed, they could actually give some fundamental understanding, but failed to provide a basis of measurement of this sensory perception correctly. So, but Stevens power law propose a power relationship between physical stimulus magnitude and internal sensation, which provides direct measurement of sensation in a sensory judgment process. So, nowadays Stevens power law is extensively used to measure the different level of sensation, internal sensation, provided we can get this value of N for different types of stimulus. Okay. So, these are the different aspects of psychophysics, laws of psychophysics. Now, we will discuss the different types of psychological scales and rating scales. What are the scales? So, we have to, if we get some sensation, how to scale. So, that is brain has got, as we have discussed, has got the ability to identify the sensation and scale it. What are the how to scale, whether it is if it is warm, how much it is warm. So, different types of scaling system we will now discuss. Okay. First we will discuss with the psychological scale. Okay. And rating scale is the most practical scale which is used in market research. Okay. That these things we will discuss one by one. A psychological scale, this is the scaling, is a process of assigning a number to a characteristics of objects or events according to a particular rule. We have to actually assign certain number, it may be a numerical number, but the number does not always correspond to the numerical value, it does not have value, we have to only give a number. Okay. So, the numbers are used as a symbol to represent certain characteristics. We cannot actually perform any arithmetic process, any arithmetic function. Okay. The rules specifying how the numbers are assigned to the characteristics to measure may be arbitrary. So, it may be arbitrary and changes as per the rule. Okay. We have to assign number, like for example, this is actually scaling is used for market research. So, I will give you an example. We give 0 for male, or 1 for female. So, this does not mean that 0 is 1 is superior to 0. So, 1 for female, 0 for male we can give. So, this is arbitrarily we can give. Okay. So, this is the process or it is making the judgment. Okay. So, in research there are 4 types of scale, psychological scale. One is the nominal scale, then is ordinal scale, then interval scale and the ratio scale. So, there are 4 different types of psychological scales. So, these 4 scales correspond to descending sequence of subgroup. That means, nominal scale has got all the subgroup, it is a very simple one, okay, most simple one. So, for example, the group of nominal scale containing the group of ordinal scale. So, this nominal scales group it contains the group all the groups of ordinal scale. Similarly, ordinal scale contains the group of interval scale. Interval scale it contains the group of ratio scale. So, psychological scaling is of 4 different steps. Okay. And moving from nominal to ratio scale it becomes complex. So, rules become more and more complex and the kind of arithmetic operation we can give, we can actually use is more and more arithmetic. So, the kind of arithmetic operation for which number can be used are increased. Okay. So, first we will start with the nominal scale. Okay. Nominal scale it deals about the it is a equality, it is a basically it give a particular value gives a group of subject which are equal, we do not discriminate. Okay. Like I will tell you. So, the numbers are used to characterize the object. Okay. All numbers of a particular class have equal value, we do not change anything, cannot be added or subtracted, multiplied or divided, we cannot do it. Okay. It distinguishes the object or event on the scale from things that are not on it, means like male or female. So, male is given 0 and female is given 1. So, all male person will be coded as 0. So, the number all numbers in the class have equal value. So, here if you are someone has got 0 that means we know he is male. Okay. That means there is no discrimination, that means it determines the equality. If you have 0 that means you are male, if someone is got 1 that means we know she is female. So, and between 1 or 0, within 1 or within 0 we actually we cannot discriminate. This is called nominal, which is very simple one. Okay. So, number 1 does not mean that 1 does not mean it is superior to 0, it is not, we cannot compare. Okay. Like football team A and football team B. So, this need not be always numerical value, it can be a alphabet or some word value. Okay. Team A and team B. So, within team A all the players are equal, we do not discriminate. Within team B all the players are. So, this is by number you can we can differentiate, by say by word we can differentiate, or by even color, like football player team we differentiate by jersey. So, white color or blue color jersey. So, white color means all they are players, okay, for a particular team, but we do not discriminate, like a number on the jersey of a player does not mean that he is superior. So, number 10 is not superior to number 1. So, that way he is not superior to number 1. That means, here it is a basically it says the equality. So, nominal scale talks about the equality of a particular group of people. It only differentiate the in a group. Okay. So, a scale in which number or letter is assigned to the object serve as a label. Okay. That is a number, you can give number or letter or classification, and those numbers have no value. Okay. A and B, they do not have any value. Okay. For instance, we assigned 0 to wool, 1 to silk. That means, all wool will have 0 and all silk will have 1. So, we cannot tell that one silk is superior to wool. Here it is only it separates, it is actually groups. So, the number 1 does not mean the superior position of number 2. The rule for nominal scale is that all members of a class have the same number, okay, and no two classes have the same number. Like silk, if we give 1, in that study we cannot give silk as 0. Okay. For a particular study we have to keep the separate, we cannot have, but next study we may it is a arbitrary. Tomorrow we are going to start another study, we can give 0 as silk, 1 as wool, that will be totally separate study. Okay. So, we will stop here. So, next class we will start with the next scale, okay, with the ordinal scale. Okay. Thank you.